Aloha, Scooterheads, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Electric Scooter Podcast, where I don't ask you to buy me a coffee, join Patreon. I don't make any money off this podcast. I don't have any skin in the game. I do promote Scooterheads sometimes. There are guys, Tim West, Alien Rides, Jimmy Chang, Ginger on Wheels. There are folks out there that do have some skin in the game, so I'm going to promote their products. I'm going to talk them up as much as I can, but nothing comes back to me, just so you know that. All I get is satisfaction. So if you want to send me an email, dagwoodstreets@gmail.com, give me an idea for a podcast, title, topic, subject, whatever you want to call it, feel free to do so, and I do get emails once in a while. Also, if you're listening to me on iTunes, they're simplifying everything. So music is just called music. Podcast is just called podcast. If you have an iPhone, it comes with a purple circle and a little microphone icon already installed on your phone. Go to the Electric Scooter Podcast and give me 5 stars. Make me feel good. That's all I get from this is feeling good, because if I'm satisfying my listeners, then that makes me feel good. And that really is the only skin I have in the game. So I appreciate you listening. I know there are a lot of other things you could be doing. You could be teaching a mouse to roller skate. You could climb up on the roof and yell at the neighbor kids. You could be drinking a beer and staring out the window wistfully. I don't know what you guys do. You could be sanding your nose in an igloo. I don't know. I don't know where you live. I don't know what you're doing. But I do appreciate that other than doing those things, you have chosen to be a listener of the Electric Scooter Podcast. And that warms my heart. I make no money from doing this podcast. I make no money. How you like me now? I make no money from doing this podcast. I make no money. How you like me now? I guess that's supposed to be ching sound, cha-ching, coins dropping into a cash register. I'm not sure why I did that, but that is kind of a price you pay. You do have to indulge me on my little jingles and my music that I force upon you. And I'm going to start doing that at the end of some of the episodes, so that if you don't like my music, you can just stop when the talk is over. But I might start sticking some original scooter music to the end of the podcast. It's something I'm mulling over. I haven't decided. We'll see. If you'd like to get in touch with the Electric Scooter Podcast, there is another way, and that is YouTube. Usually the most recent 5 episodes or so, sometimes more if I get lazy, are posted on YouTube. Now, to be honest, I don't get a lot of listeners on YouTube, because why pull up a video to just stare at nothing and listen to a podcast? But some people do. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's why I do that. I know specifically of 5 to 10 people, because they communicate on YouTube, who actually do listen to the podcast on YouTube, and you can do that. Some people enjoy that. Enjoy yourself, scooter heads. Whatever blows your skirt up, I'm happy to comply. And this time, I got a response on YouTube from episode 90, and it's on your next podcast. Can you discuss the quality of e-scooters' batteries and the scooter itself in general, especially the ones coming from China? Are they safe? I see some videos about PEVs, including e-scooters catching fire and even exploding. Are the ones being sold here in the States quality checked? Well, there's a couple things to get into right there, and I'll just do it quickly. If you would like to go back and listen to some older podcasts, I did address a few of those. Batteries specifically, episode 87, And if you want to go further back, episodes 34 and 35, Ginger on Wheels, somebody who knows a lot more about batteries and controllers than I do. Listen, this is a scooter lifestyle podcast. And what that allows me the flexibility to do is talk about anything. I can go to different countries and scoot and interview someone. I can talk about jackets. I can talk about whether I like scooting in the mountains or the desert, or actually any topic, as long as it is sort of related to scooters and PEVs. I envision this podcast to be the type of podcast I like to listen to. When I go to bed every single night, I got my earphones in, my earbuds, whatever they are, and I drift off to sleep listening to a podcast. So I just like to hear the sound of a voice and get some information. And if you want really hardcore details on electric scooters, go to the folks I mentioned: Electric Scooter Guide, Jimmy Chang, Alien Rides, Tim West, Ginger on Wheels. There's a bunch of folks up there. Wrong Way, don't forget him. There's a lot of folks out there. Electric Scooter Academy, Yogi Steve. There's a lot of folks to watch on YouTube that, well, not Yogi Steve. He's really kind of a reality show. They all have a little different spin, and my spin is just relax, hear about what's going on in the news with scooters and that kind of thing. But there are episodes that we address a lot of these specific items. But I'm happy to talk about them again. And this person had a great idea for a topic suggestion. It's Jojie is the person's name, Jojie. And that is to take a look at scooters that are manufactured in China and put together or assembled from components that are made in different factories. And you can see a lot of companies that use the exact same components on different scooter models from different companies. And I think that's an interesting topic. I've only broached it. So thank you, Jojie, for that suggestion. Also, he goes on to say, if you can, explain the reason why several e-scooters look exactly the same, almost like a clone. We're going to talk about that here. We get into the interview from Mexico City about the Xiaomi M365. But Highboy, GoTrax, Evercross, a lot of these scooters look like Xiaomi. They look like Ninebot. Yeah, there's a good reason for that. Companies can just source components from different factories and boom, they got a new scooter. Or they can take the same scooter and put a higher level component on it, change the handlebars, change the height, put a better battery in it, and boom, you got a new scooter. Look, new for 2023 coming out is, it's the same model, but they've got a couple better components and it's easy to do. It's easy to source. Another good point that Jojie brings up that I have brought up a number of times is buy from a reputable dealer. I have specifically got feedback, people communicating with me, telling me that at least in Europe, there are companies that order a scooter from China, and the company, the distributor, is just a warehouse. They get the box, and then they put your address on it and send it out the door. Now, if you go through Voro Motors, Apollo, Fluid Freeride, there are others out there. I'm not so familiar with Rev Rides or some of the other companies, but there are other companies that do it as well. They will take that scooter out of the box, check everything, spin the tires. They have technicians that check the bolts, make sure everything is what it's supposed to be, put it back in the box, and send it to you. Now, if you buy off Alibaba or some distributor that does not do that, you know what they say, you get what you pay for. You do pay a little extra money for the service of checking that scooter, but it's well worth it because a lot of times you'll end up with a scooter that has an issue. You got nobody to talk to. Something's wrong. You got nowhere to mail it. You're paying for all the mailing back and forth yourself, and you're waiting months and months. It's just ridiculous. Really, I'm telling you, this is my advice to you. This is why you listen to the Electric Scooter Podcast. Spend the extra $20, $40, whatever it is, to go through a good distributor. I always recommend Fluid Freeride and Voro Motors. They've been very good to me, both companies. They're responsive. The people that work there are good. They're genuinely looking out for your best interest. Joja, I hope I answered your questions, and I will look as a topic of scooters that are made of the same components. I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure when I'll get to it. It may be a few weeks. I got a couple topics already lined up and in the can. So let's get on with the show. All right, check out when the hi-hat comes in here. You ready? Love the hi-hat. I'm a big fan of the Isley Brothers, actually. Crazy. One of the reasons is because I love the hi-hat in Isley Brothers songs. It's crazy, but they just have a great hi-hat. It's perfect in the mix. I know it's weird, but hey. I gotta tell you, scooter heads, this episode was a rough one. Whoa. Let me start off by saying my Spanish is not that good. I do know some vocabulary because of other languages that use the same vocabulary that I do have experience with, but those words don't always cross over. I did have 2 weeks of Spanish language training in Ecuador, and of course there's Google Translate, and there are tools available on the web to figure stuff out. But my Spanish es muy mal. No es muy bueno. So what you're about to listen to is an interview that I conducted in Mexico, 100% in Spanish. So I'm not 100% certain of everything that Senor Esteban Juarez of Z e-scooters. That's Z as in Z. I think most countries in the world say Z instead of Z, but in America, we say Z. So it's Z e-scooters or Z e-scooters. I think during the interview, he even said Z scooters or something like that. I'm not 100% sure what the guy was saying. He's a nice guy. His Spanish is very clear. To me, he talks fast, but if you don't speak a language, everything sounds fast, doesn't it? I know he said some things about scooters, so I'm a little liberal with my translation, filling in the blanks. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because I had a rough time figuring out, how am I going to do this? You know, on TV, sometimes you still hear the Spanish voice in the background and the English is louder over the top of it. But in my case, you've got me asking questions and performing his voice. So what I did is I altered my voice, the Dagwood Streets interviewer host, a little bit. I just tweaked the pitch on it so you could kind of tell the difference between me, Dagwood Streets, talking here in the intro, and then Esteban Juarez and me, Dagwood Streets, conducting the interview. You had to distinguish, you know what I'm saying, between my voice, the interviewer, and my voice, the interviewee. I hope it turned out, and still, I didn't know what to really do. How do I approach this? That's what I decided on doing. And I think I am going to do an entire episode in Spanish because Esteban Juarez deserves that. He gave me his time. He was very genial, very chévere, very nice of him to invite me to his store and explain his story and background and about scooters in Mexico in general and Mexico City specifically. If you hear CDMX, that's Ciudad de Mexico. So CDMX is Mexico City. If you do speak Spanish, hold on, because I'm probably going to put out a little side episode that is entirely in Spanish. Am I going to get a lot of listeners? I don't think so, but just throwing it out there. That's what I'm doing. Want to give you a heads up. Hope you like this episode. It took a lot out of me. I'm telling you, I worked really hard to get this out to you. I hope it's quality. I hope scooter heads appreciate it. And if it's not that great, well, lay your head back on the pillow, put your headphones on, and maybe it'll send you on a little daydream south of the border to Ciudad de Mexico. Es un placer conocerte, Esteban, y gracias por permitir esta entrevista. Cuéntanos un poco sobre los antecedentes de tu empresa. Nice to meet you, Esteban. Can you give me a little bit of background about your company?
Ok, gracias, no, un gusto.
Okay,
gracias por venir.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for
Tenemos
coming.
ya desde el
We
2019
got started
que nosotros
in
iniciamos
2019. The truth is, it was a pleasure because we saw the issue of electric mobility in Mexico City that was happening. And at that time, it was mainly rentals. The companies were there and they were established. And we saw one at a time the way in which people began taking to the rental scooters.
Y lo que vimos fue pues un nicho en donde se podía aprovechar la movilidad.
And we figured that there was a niche that we could take advantage of that would allow individual personal mobility for folks who would like to get home, get to work, get to school, get to the office. And it was an alternative option, and we could provide them and give them the opportunity.
Personal, individual de la gente que quisiera trasladarse a su casa, trabajo, escuela, oficina. Y lo vimos más que nada como una opción para
that
que
in the end, they'd have a scooter themselves in which they could move about more efficiently, get more distance in a shorter time by avoiding city traffic. As I said, we started in 2019, so we've been here for 2.5 years. And we took on the issue of the pandemic, but it was a lot of work, and we just continue working on our efforts here at Z e-scooters for Mexico.
Y bueno, ya llevamos ahorita 2 años y medio, por así decirlo. Nos tomó el tema de la pandemia, pero con mucho esfuerzo, pues continuamos con el tema y el proyecto de ZE Scooters México.
La mayoría de la gente usa scooters o patinetes por placer o para ir al trabajo o la escuela. Oops, I got to jump in here for a second. I forgot to put the English part. I am asking Senor Esteban Juarez, the CEO, manager, owner of Z e-scooters, whether most people use the scooters as commuters or for pleasure.
Yo creo que es combinado, son ambos. Porque hay personas que, por ejemplo, pueden disfrutarlo el fin de semana teniendo un tipo...
I think it's a combination because there are both types. There are people who, for example, can enjoy scooters on the weekend and recreation. They can go up to the mountains. Some of them can take them to dirt roads, or even if there's not dirt roads, they can take them in different types of environments that differ from the city. And some people use it for their daily commute. You just have to look around here and all of a sudden traffic can just boom, cars everywhere. And with a scooter, you can cut with precision through the traffic and get where you're going a little quicker, whether it's for work or school.
Vale, ¿y las carreteras de la Ciudad de México son aptas para andar en patinete? How are the roads in Mexico City? Are they good for riding scooters?
Well, unfortunately, some parts of town have potholes. Some areas have lots of potholes, but if you're careful, you're not going to put yourself in any kind of imminent danger.
Can you tell us a little bit about the laws and regulations and how that affects people riding scooters in Mexico City?
Desafortunadamente, nosotros que nos tocó ver algunos videos de otros países, por ejemplo, particularmente el de España, vemos que en intersecciones...
Well, you can see in videos from other countries, particularly Spain, where scooters were coming and going freely at intersections, and then all of a sudden they decided to put a cap on the speed limits to 25 miles per hour. We were going to try something similar here in Mexico City, but they haven't come up with a regulation yet that applies to scooters. And it would be pretty complicated. So, up to now, I don't know of any recommendations, but of course, you got to think about safety first. But in the end, there's a lot of people in Mexico that their job is looking for new types of regulations. And you never know, maybe some municipalities somewhere might start looking to add regulations. But as far as safety, one thing to look at, there are a lot of potholes. Maybe they ought to be looking at those first. But as of now, there are no specific regulations that pertain to electric scooters or that require you to apply for any type of document or get permission to ride an electric scooter. And there is no requirement for license plates. However, we do have a secretary in charge of regulating different aspects such as mobility laws regarding what part of the road a scooter can ride in, whether it's a bike lane or traffic lanes. And it can get risky sharing the lanes with pedestrians and bicycles. Pedestrians aren't used to something rapidly coming up behind them and passing them, and we have to share those lanes with the pedestrians, with the bicyclists. Cyclists aren't necessarily used to having scooters sharing the same space as them. And we just ask people, no matter what your mode of transportation, to just always be careful.
I see, of course. And how about the police? Are they an issue?
We haven't come across any issues of people being detained. However, you can see on YouTube and other countries, like on YouTube, there's a video in Germany where scooter heads got tackled like it was American football. We haven't seen anything like that here, and people have been stopped and told to slow down, but not anything like radar controlled or getting hassled like you can see happening in Italy because they were going too fast or because they had modifications on their scooter or because they're riding at night.
So you would say it's safe for tourists to ride scooters in Mexico?
Sí, es seguro andar en ellos. Digo, desafortunadamente.
Yes, I would say it's safe to ride. It depends on whether it's a rental, who is renting it. But for example, buying a scooter and living in Mexico or staying in Mexico for a certain amount of time, it's very safe to ride them. I can give you an example. There's a city here in Mexico called Playa del Carmen. And I've dealt directly with them, and they have sales and rentals. And in the case of rentals, a lot of tourists come because they want to be able to tour around and check out the area while they're on vacation.
In your store, do you have both sales and rentals?
Sure, if tourists come to Mexico City, they can rent or they can buy here in our shop. But if they decide they want to rent, they can rent by the day. It's not expensive. And if they want to rent for longer periods, they can as well. It works very well in Playa del Carmen, and it works here also.
When I was looking at scooters cruising by, I happened to notice that a large percent of them were Segway 9-Bot Max. What are the popular scooters here?
Well, the most popular brand that you'll see circulating in Mexico City, and it's been around for years, no doubt, is the Xiaomi. It is the most popular. The Xiaomi is kind of considered the scooter for the masses, and that's what everybody knows. But unfortunately, what you see are copies of Xiaomi. And then you have copies of the copies. So you got some really very bad clones that people don't even realize it's not an original. Some people buy these scooters, these clones of clones, and then they find out when they go to repair it that they have a difficult time because they tried to save money on their initial purchase, and in the long run, they ended up actually spending more.
Is there a lot of competition to sell and rent scooters in Mexico City?
There's competition, and it is not all good. It kind of brings back the previous point I was making about all the clones that are floating around out there because there's a lot of black market stuff that is selling. When you have all these clones floating around and something happens with, let's say, an electrical or some other part, and then you go to replace it, and then you find out that the parts don't fit, and some unscrupulous scooter dealers will still sell these scooters because they have them in their inventory and they're backed up and they need to get rid of them. But one of the important things about buying a scooter is aftercare service. It's like buying a car or a motorcycle or anything else. When you go out there, you want the shiniest, newest one. But then after that, what happens when things go wrong down the line? Is your dealer going to be able to service your purchase? And that's going to be difficult to do when some of these dealers don't have the spare parts or the mechanics. And I can tell you that we support the product all the way down to after your purchase. And when you come in tomorrow and you have some kind of problem, we're going to be able to repair your scooter, whatever happens, even if it was damaged. In some scenarios, your scooter will be out of commission for a long time with some dealers.
That's a good point. You are a motorcycle dealership and you have mechanics that work on motorcycles, and I noticed you have a lot of scooters that are being modified and repaired. So that's awesome to know that there is no shortage of mechanical talent here right at your store.
Yes, for many years I worked in graphic arts, and there were a lot of the same issues. You got to have your printers up and running, you got to have spare parts. There's competition to get those spare parts to keep your printing machines running. So even before I started this business, I had an awareness of what is required for after purchase services and the need to have the spare parts and the experience to work on the machines. So everything is cataloged. We keep a close relationship with the manufacturer regarding the use of certain parts and which parts wear out faster than others, which models are going to need extra spare parts, having plenty of tubes and tires in stock. And then there's training the mechanics. Say, for example, you're going to open a microwave oven, even a blender, certain things. You have to be careful and handle certain parts with care because you can actually get hurt while performing those repairs. For example, you have to be really careful with these batteries because you're dealing with a component that in the end is highly dangerous because of the lithium. There may be back alley shops that are willing to work on these things, but you don't know what you're getting yourself into, and that person making the repair could also put themselves in danger. You're not sure if you're getting a high quality job and everything is done correctly. It might be cheaper, but sometimes it costs a little more money to get things done properly, to make sure that the person who bought the scooter is satisfied and gets a full life out of the scooter and the various components. Well, there he goes, Esteban Juarez of Zed e-scooters in CDMX, Ciudad de Mexico. What a great guy. I wish my Spanish was better. And there is a lot more to the interview. If you'd like to hear more, please let me know. It's a lot of work for me, I'm telling you. Translating and doing both voices. Whew. My fun meter pegged about a quarter of the way through processing it. The interview was great. It was fun getting from my Airbnb, finding his location, and going inside the shop, taking pictures, taking some videos, meeting him. When you're casually speaking Spanish, it's a lot different than when you're recording and it's for an audience. I think there's a lot more pressure. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Stay tuned for a complete Spanish version, extended version. Si tú entiendes español, si tú no entiendes el español, man, then you're just wasting your time probably listening. But if maybe you want to learn some Spanish, some scooter terminology, whatever. I'm telling you, his Spanish language was above my head. I had to slow it down and listen and make sure I know what he's saying. And of course, in Mexico, the Spanish they speak has some slang elements that other countries don't have. It's just a little bit different. That's me. That's my problem. That's nothing to do with Mexican society or the way they talk. I love Mexican Spanish. It is very clear, and I enjoy slang, and they got a ton of slang. Hope you'll be with us next week. I'm not going to play a song, one of my original songs. Maybe I'll do that next week. Right now, like I said, my fun meter is pegged, so keep the shiny side up and the dirty side down, scooter heads. Stay safe, wear your helmet, wear your gear. Aloha.